The new Gen 4 Levo is here, now with a completely redesigned frame, updated kinematics, a powerful motor developed in-house by Specialized, and a load more. I sat down with Buck and Marco from the R&D team to break down what's changed and why.
I have an engine actually here, so let me just bend over to show it to you guys. This is a clear model, so to see inside the guts of the motor. The main goal of this motor was to actually really work on the noise, but also on the consistency, how the motor delivers the noise, but as well as the endurance, how long it actually lasts for a lifetime. So when we came up with the requirements, we made it pretty clear what it's supposed to be, right? Because over that decade of engineering and also learning, right, from riders in the field, we learned quite a bit how these levers are being used in the field. So we were, for the first time, really putting all the requirements together that it meets the rider's needs, which does, like I said, consists of that really nice balance of noise, that engineered sound, that it sounds really good. There's obviously still sound, but it sounds all the same. But it also has this tremendous amount of torque. We're looking here at 111 Newton meters of torque, quite a bit, plus 720 watts of power. And obviously all new power electronics with a new ride controller, very smooth, very natural in its feel. And yeah, it's a great ride from just talking motor.
So the previous Levo was pretty much class leading in its power and motor and battery at the time. I'm curious, 111 is it's a specific number. Why is it 111?
Well, you know, so we have a secondary motor which has 666 watts, right? It's also a very specific number and has 101 Newton meters. So we just love to play with, with things, right? We just love to have fun in life. That's how 111 came together. And if you put it on the dyno, you actually measure 111 because it's very engineered. So all the motors are the same. So we actually have a little bit more power, but capped it by software. So it's, just there's no specific to it. There's one specific number, which is at cadence 80. That's for torque also matters. At cadence 80, we have well above 80 Newton meter torque too. So I think you will measure at cadence 80 like something like 88 Newton meters of torque, which is tremendous increasement from the previous generation.
Where are we at with power? Because power is an easy number to look at on a spreadsheet or a comparison chart, and it seems to me like are we in the chase of power numbers for the sake of power? And
well, all these numbers, to be honest, is a chase, right? And some of these numbers don't even mean anything because these peak values, what nobody asks me yet so far is when do you reach these numbers and how long do they stay? Like 111 Newton meters torque, for how long should be the question, right? What torque do you have at cadence 80? Because that's where it matters. That's where you pedal on the trail. Same to power. At what rider cadence do you actually have full power? I think those are the values which really matter. And for us in this particular engine, as you can see, we spent quite some time on a decent size E-machine. We built torque obviously early, but can keep it very long. And the same with power. We already have pretty much max power at cadence 60 and all the way to cadence 140. So we have these plateaus, which you, I think, noticed on the climbs. It brings you over very steep inclines very easily.
Yeah.
It's all about usable power, but it's all about traction too, because those numbers, they're just numbers.
Is there anything built into it to I guess, harness that power? Because uncontrollable power is not actually good power. So is there anything in here that helps with delivering that power?
Absolutely, yes. So the way we measure the rider input torque and the way we measure rider cadence and speed and the position of the engine, there's a gyro in there which knows where the engine is from its leveling degree standing. So we basically amplify the power differently by the case the rider is in. And with that, we have a lot of traction. But obviously, Buck here, who built the bike around this thing, the bike, the tires, the geometry, also the suspension, that all adds up in traction, right? It all adds up. Can you make the climb or can you not make the climb? So it's an entire chassis. It's not just the engine. It's the entire bike, which actually makes it a good climbing bike or something which you will wash out at every other corner.
So there's been some pretty significant changes to the frame, starting with how the battery actually fits into the frame. So can you talk to some of the rationale behind why you've chosen that route?
You know, one of the things we pursue when we're developing bikes is rider feedback and shop feedback. And what kept coming back to us was SWAT integration. People really enjoy it. They said, oh, you know, you guys pioneered it with the Stone Jumper way back when. Why can't we have it on e-bikes? But the challenge has always been the battery eats up all that space. So we went back, took a look at that, like how could we make this happen in real life? And by shortening up the battery and making more room in the down tube, we could accomplish that. And then it came down to, okay, how do we get at that space where you could store things? What made the most sense was having a way to get at your battery and SWAT at the same time, rather than Swiss cheesing out your down tube and running into compromises there. So we looked at, should we remove the battery like the Levo 1 at the bottom? Pretty easy to do, but also at the same time it gets pretty muddy down there, and you don't want to be faffing around with your hands all dirty. And so we looked at doing it to the side, and through FEA we discovered that it was actually making more sense structurally to do it that way. And so we went that route, built frames, put them on the test machine, and in the head tube ultimate test we realized, wow, this is significantly stronger than even Levo 3 is here. So we said, well, okay, we already know that riders are putting a bigger fork on it than we're allowing. So let's see how we can do this, how much we can test it out strength-wise. And at the end of the day, we ended up that we could allow a rider to put a 180 mil fork on there and not void the warranty, which is the first time we're ever doing that. So you got a nice, easy access to get your battery in and out, easy access to SWAT, and a very, very strong frame.
Yeah. So you mentioned the frame is actually stronger in testing compared to the Gen 3 that had the kind of...
In head tube ultimate, yep. So if you're trying to rip the head tube off, like if you did a drop off your roof to flat landing or something, it's very, very strong.
Interesting. And I've got to say, actually, on the first ride, I took a jacket out yesterday.
Yeah.
And the SWAT came in really handy because it's just a single 4 mil, is it?
5 mil, yeah.
5 mil, undid the battery. There was enough to pack my small jacket down, stuff it in the frame, and actually really beneficial. We've got a few different battery options. So
yeah, so that's the 840 watt hour pack, which comes stock with the bike. That's our, and there's SWAT on top, just to name it, there's SWAT on top. Has a nice little neat handle, bolts on to this upper bracket. Doesn't have any LEDs or reading the state of charge. That's intentional because this battery is IPX7 waterproof. So it's the highly most grade you can actually achieve for a battery. We like it a lot.
What does that mean?
It means in theory you can drop this battery 1 meter underwater.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, for 30 minutes. That's the test.
Okay.
So IPX7 is 1 meter, 30 minutes, and there's no water ingress. And to achieve that, we really came with big old seals and removed everything not needed. So if you want to know how much charge this battery has, you just plug it into a charger. Now on the charger, you can read the battery percentage out. That's one battery pack. Then we have a 600 watt hour battery pack, which is basically exactly 10 centimeters shorter, which offers you even more SWAT, brings the weight down by a bit more than a kilogram, and also brings the weight down from a gravity perspective. And then we have this unique little range extender, which actually works in a standard cage. So you don't, not a standard cage, we made a custom cage actually, but the cage works for both. Water, any water bottle in the world, so you don't need to have a specialized bottle, and this range extender. So the same cage works for both. You don't need to, remove or add any accessories. And this just plugs in and you can ride this as a standalone piece, just the range extender, 280 watt hours, or you pair it together with these 840 watt hour pack, and then you're well above 1000 watt hours and gives you very long riding. So 3 batteries, modular, all of them are compatible. We actually have the battery cover is as a standalone piece, so it's not bolted onto the batteries. So you can easily swap batteries throughout the day and or ride with an empty down tube, and then you have tremendous amount of
So you can actually
storage.
ride just with this range extender?
Yeah.
Okay, and you don't get full power from that?
That's a good question.
Okay.
So because this is a 1P configuration battery, to not harm these cells, we can't give you full power, but we give you full torque. So that's interesting. So you will have full torque, 111 Newton meters on that S-Works bike, but just half the power. So that means if you have to start on a climb because for whatever reason your friend stopped and you have to start on a steep climb, you have the torque of a full power bike, but later if you're reaching a high cadence, you have the power of 400-ish watts, 380 to be precise,
I
something
like
like
this
that.
modular approach because you can really achieve a different level of bike weight with
Yeah.
the battery, because I actually think the battery is one of the biggest contributors to weight of a bike, isn't it? And I know we actually weighed one of these with a 600 battery.
That's right.
And a slightly lighter spec, and that was coming out at 19.8 kilos or something.
Sub 20 for sure.
Yeah, you can build a lighter spec, or lighter duty, should I say, smaller battery, still with a 600 at sub 20, or you can have something with an 840.
With this, it's even lighter than the 600, right?
Well,
but
there you go.
280 watt hours. The question is, what are you doing with it? So we use this in park laps. You know, when you have chairlift access, and you basically go out, but you do like these chairlifts to a mountain, and then you have like this traverse kind of climb, 20 minutes climbs or something like that. So you can do a bunch of loops on the mountain with chairlifts, or you have the jumps and the berms, and you know, with this, it's a different kind of bike than with the core pack installed.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can definitely ride it the way you want, and it gives you a different ride feel, however you set it up.
For sure. What changes were made from the previous Gen 3 Levo in terms of geometry? Because that was, you know, pretty progressive in terms of the geometry, and more so the configuration as well. Riders have a few different options with flip chips and things.
You know, when Levo 3 came out, and since then, even it's been widely heralded as a really good riding bike. So we didn't want to go in and scramble the eggs, so to speak. Kept the geometry very similar, reach is the same, head angle same, for instance. The one thing we did change was seat tube angle, and part of the reason for that is just, you know, a steeper seat tube angle helps in a normal climbing position with your saddle at full top out. But the other thing is, as the motor gets more powerful, as we're gaining more traction and climbing more ridiculously steep climbs, you have to drop your saddle to get that control on the super steeps. And on the Levo 3 with the slacker seat tube angle, I would find personally that I'm dropping that seat and my cockpit gets pretty cramped. You're trying to have small, precise inputs for climbing, and it gets difficult. With the steeper seat tube, that distance to your handlebar stays more consistent and makes it easier to control, basically.
You've got a flip chip on the rear,
Yeah,
as well as a BB height adjust.
exactly. So a couple of things that are very similar. We have the same head tube adjustment, or head tube angle adjustment, so you can go plus or minus a degree. We've got a flip chip in the rear shock, so you can adjust your bottom bracket height by 6 millimeters up or down, and a flip chip in the horse pivot in the rear, which will add or subtract 9 millimeters to your chainstay length. So kind of with the theme of configurable batteries, we've got configurable geometry, and then a lot of tunability in the suspension as well. So we set the bike up kind of how we think it's best balanced for all types of trail riding. But obviously your style of riding and where you live, the particular trails that you ride, you may want something a little bit different, and that's totally achievable here.
Yeah. I appreciate that it comes spec'd with proper brakes, super powerful Maven brakes,
Yeah.
pretty much downhill gravity spec tires, which I think lots of riders will appreciate. It's
Yeah.
ready to rip pretty much out of the crate, isn't it? It's ready to go.
Exactly. You know, there is a lot of talk about lightweight, full power e-bikes. And I think it's applicable for some riders, but the feedback that we get, most riders are all about capability. You know, not trying to chintz out on the suspension or the tires or the brakes. And yeah, this Levo is probably most capable when we put out with the spec.
Marco, the display looks.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. Super high definition, looks high resolution. Reminds me of maybe a wearable that you might.
It could be, yeah. Well, in fact, you know, when we looked at the different choices of screens, we found that Generation 1 Apple Watch screen, which has a very high resolution, has a good size, so you can still cut a hole in the top tube without making the hole too big. And we ended up with this beautiful screen, you know, and then we just had to pack it in a way that actually it can integrate into top tube. We wanted it to be boltless, so it looks actually quite neat. And we added tons of features in there. Like I could go on for like half an hour, but like the number one is embedded Apple Find My. So it's not an AirTag, it's actually electronics from Apple inside our display, which doesn't run out of battery because we're using this big thing, right? So you always will find the location of your bike if you're an Apple Find My user. I think the beauty about this is if this bike for whatever reason gets stolen, right, and you mark it as stolen, then it's useless to the guy who stole it, right? Because the retailers will have it marked as stolen. The rider can't do anything with it if the system lock is enabled, right? We have this amazing system lock since long time ago. So if a rider uses the specialized system lock, which makes the bike rendered useless, basically, right? You need the rider's app, or you need the PIN code. I don't think they can hack the PIN code, the theft. You have Apple FIMA enabled. So basically, if that rider goes to a retailer trying to change out some components, then, you know, they realize he's the theft. So A, you can find it probably, and B, whoever steals it, it's useless to them. So it's quite neat. I like it because it doesn't run out of batteries. My AirTags I mean, it's still a coin cell, and I've been there before where it's like, you know, I don't always check and then I have low battery. This thing doesn't run out of battery. But from a display application perspective, it now has many features such as training zones for heart rate. So you see if you're in zone 1, 2, 3, 4. For example, these watches, these Garmin watches, or any chest strips, you compare these with the bike, with the display, then you have the heart rate on the bike, but also the zones, if you know your threshold zones. That's pretty cool. I like that a lot because I don't know, ex-roadie, so I'm into heart rate zones.
Buck, I noticed we've got the Genie shock on here.
Basically, you know, a lot of shocks have high volume air cans, and what the cool thing about that is that nice plush feel. The detriment to that is that with a lot of volume, you'll bottom out easier. So adding air, just an air token into the general air volume will affect the overall range. So you're, you know, taking out some of that initial plushness of the shock. What the Genie does, it has a bigger air volume overall at the start, and then as you get closer to the end stroke, the piston shuts off the airflow to the entire air volume, and then just concentrates it to the bottom out air volume. And with the shock, you can tune both air volumes independently. So you have a nice plush feeling at the initial stroke. In the middle, you have more support, and at the end, you've got a lot of bottom out resistance. So it's got the like coil feel in an air shock, but you're not having to worry about bottom out. And then, of course, you know, we tune it to where we think it's best in the most general terms of use, but riders can go in and easily tune the air volume either side.
And if somebody wanted to experiment with a different type of shock, can they do that, or is it just recommended to use this, or could you run a coil or your favorite shock from another brand if you wanted to experiment?
Absolutely, yeah. We didn't kind of pigeonhole riders into one type of shock. It's a standard 210 by 55 shock, so any other shock that you want that fits those or that has those dimensions will work on the bike, whether it's a coil or an air shock. Also good to know too that 95% of the parts of this shock are the exact same as a standard Floatex from Fox, so it doesn't take a bunch of different parts to service the shock. It's straight up easy to service for dealers. But yeah, if you want to step out and do a coil shock or something else, again, it's just a standard metric 210 by 55 shock.
Marco, I've just got a couple of questions on the motor again.
Yes,
back
please.
To this. I think one of the maybe not buzzwords, but a phrase often used now is like overrun and you know, sensitivity and this kind of thing. Like I noticed on the menu when I was going through it, there's now several different options for overrun, for example. Can you talk a little bit more to that and why a rider might use that and choose that and tune it?
Yeah, well, we went pretty deep in the control algorithms of these engines, and like, you know, Buck has riders to be able to customize the shock and the feel of the shock. You can customize the engine too. So we don't want to push everybody into long overruns because they're maybe for some riders a bit dangerous. An overrun is when do you stop pedaling? How long does the motor still support you? And many people like long overruns, but I know a lot of guys, they don't, right? They want, when I stop pedaling, the motor to be as quick as possible off. So with us, you can choose what you want, right? We have a short overrun, a medium overrun, which has a really nice long fade out, but it's like very predictable. And then we have the long, right? Which just goes all the way to the end with full current.
So kind of just abruptly stops.
Yeah,
gives
exactly.
You that push and then cuts out.
But not just that, with this system, you can also choose if a slight rotation of the cranks backwards will kill this overrun or keep it going. That's something nobody else has done in the past yet, because I believe there's also, again, different rider needs. Some guys actually like to kill the motor in backwards pedaling, instantly goes off. Others want it to stay on. And what you've written is on, which I think is actually pretty cool, because then it feels like you don't always have to constantly keep pedaling to make it up the hill. You know, the motor kind of is there with you, and it supports you a bit longer. And if you ever have to course correct your pedal slightly, happens often if there's rocks and roots in the way and you slightly have to do this, you're not off and then awkward on again, right? So it just keeps on going. But everything customizable from that perspective. Yeah. Same with shuttle mode, with 4 settings actually in shuttle mode. Same with responsiveness, how quickly does the E-machine here build up torque. And it's, I would say, quite intuitive to tune it. Same as the shocks, we ship it with the settings we kind of like the most. But if riders want to do something else, then welcome to change it.
Yeah. And I noticed that the voltage is different to maybe something that's we've had in the past. I think there's a lot of 36 volt motors out there. The Marley was maybe a 40.
The SL systems, you mean? Those SL systems, they were higher voltage, 48 volts. Okay. So a higher voltage, basically, this engine is at the higher voltage too. Just means that you need a bit less of a current to achieve the power, right? And with less current, you can build these, where all my connectors, the connectors down here, you can build these connectors a bit smaller, because everything can be basically downsized for a lower current with a higher voltage. So higher voltage gives you more efficiency, but also allows you way faster charging, because charging is also uses the voltage basically to charge up a battery. So definitely the most efficient motor we've done yet. And you maybe also noticed this, how we built the power electronics touching the engine housing. So that's to get the heat out, right? The MOSFETs are right behind these cooling fins, nicely attached to the main body of the motor, so we actually distribute the heat quite well. The same happens over here. This green inside this stator is not just the green thing for fashion, it actually has some functions too. Functions for noise, it actually gets rid of that whining noise, which typically is like the stator and the rotor having a bit uneven air gaps. So this green potted material helps with that, but also helps with getting the heat out of the rotor stator package into the motor housing. And all this fancy stuff you see in this, you see these ribs, they're all for stiffness, etc. So all in all, we've really focused on an overall package which delivers this tremendous amount of power, but with a really nice sound engineered sound. In the past, we had kind of chargers which charged at a standard speed, sort of like 4 to 5 hours to charge a battery. They were kind of simple chargers, and for this particular new bike, we said we want to have smarter chargers which can communicate with these batteries, which would allow us then fast charging. Why fast charging? Because often there's the situation where you maybe ride twice a day, early morning rides, and then take a breakfast and maybe ride again with the family. For that particular hour of breakfast, we can charge 0 to 80% in less than 1 hour. We charge fast 0 to 80. Right, the last 20% we basically fade down and take our time to load up the cell. It's still fast from 0 to 100. It's like 2 hours, but now you can imagine, right? It takes us 20% an entire hour, but the first 80% we charge in an hour. But it really allows you this. Either you forgot to charge the bike, which happened to both of us in the past. You're like, oh, okay, and then you quickly blow up energy, or you do double rides a day. And I think the other interesting thing on that charger is you can choose if you want to charge it fast, standard, eco, if you have like power grid issues, and or just to 80% if for storage, or if that was my last ride for a couple weeks, then you just put it there, or classic winter storage.
You're always working on new stuff, I'm sure. And I spoke to one of the team. He said he's been working on this for more than 3 years. So where do you guys see things going in 3-4 years from now when you're looking at Gen 5 or even further out?
What we're looking at is really the motor control, the algorithms. I think there's still ways to learn. This bike is already tons better in the inclines and how you can actually modulate, use the power, how smooth it is, how you can actually make it over difficult climbs. I think there's still stuff to learn there from a software perspective. And that's definitely we're going to spend some time on.
And Buck, I think we've gone from a few years of trying to make bikes crazy light, and then I think now we've almost the industry's kind of settling on, let's just spec bikes that riders can actually go out and ride hard on the trails. Do you think that's going to continue, or do you think we're going to still try and find out these ways of saving weight just to hit numbers?
There's always going to be some trickery. You know, you can't avoid it if you're trying to be competitive in the market. But I think, yeah, for trail riding, I think everybody's going to go that way. You know, as more people come into the fold, maybe there's going to be more slices in the pie, or more segments in e-bikes that bikes get built for. We'll see where it goes. But yeah, I think having appropriate builds are going to be key.
Big thanks to Bark and Marco for taking the time to talk through the new Levo. If you've got any questions or thoughts about the Gen 4 Levo, drop them down in the comments, and I'll catch you all soon.